Welcome back to the Constantine reviews with episode 5, Danse Vaudou. Last episode took quite a toll on Constantine and Zed, especially considering the painful sacrificial death of Gary Lester in between episodes. But this time we're back to fighting random supernatural occurrences that you might find familiar considering the title of the episode Danse Vaudou, so you can pretty much guess who we'll be seeing again. But not right away, since the show begins on the streets of New Orleans. A drunk urinates in an alley, and a woman walks behind him as he flashes his badge, letting her and us know he's a cop. And as the woman continues down the alley, a Japanese woman in a surgical mask appears and asks the woman if she thinks she's pretty. Which is one hell of a veiled reference, because if you're not familiar, there's a Japanese urban legend of a woman in a surgical mask who asks people if she's pretty, called Kujisaki Onna, or slit-mouthed woman, for reasons we'll see later. It's not really connected to the episode, but rather a really clever use of urban myth. The woman doesn't answer the question, which is when our urban legend uses a pair of scissors to slash and kill her. The cop tries shooting her, but the bullets naturally just pass through as the woman disappears. The cop in the opening, who we're introduced to in this episode, and will be a big part of it, is a man named Jim Corrigan, and I'll go a lot more into who he is later on in the video. We then shift to the Constantine cave as Zed is trying to get a vision from the map's blood marks, but isn't responding to it and fears her powers are failing. However, John's solution is to fix another mystical device for her to use. He has a cigarette in his mouth as well, but the no smoking on screen thing is maintained as he never takes a puff of it. John wants Zed to use the zoetrope, which is from the court of Queen Victoria, used by her personal magician to induce a hypnotic state. Zed looks into it and it starts to affect her, until she has a vision of a boy named Jimmy being taught to shoot by his mother, and when her vision stops, the map indicates that, appropriately enough, they're heading to New Orleans. They get to the alley and John uses another mystical device, a crystal bracelet that indicates spirits. Blue shows one was recently present, red means bad news. Chaz mentions the cop shot at the attacker but missed, however there's no hole marks on the wall, which is when Jim Corrigan appears to applaud Constantine's amateur detective skills. And when he mentions his name, Zed responds in a kinda creepy way.
Slow as smooth, smooth as fast. And squeeze.
Did you hear that?
Was that your mother teaching you to shoot?
What?
Don't mind her, she's, psychic, so...
Oh yeah, she's psychic, it's fine, just ignore her incredibly intimate knowledge of his childhood. That wasn't exactly keeping things on the down low. Not really the best way to get the guy to trust you. Not unreasonably, Corrigan assumes they're con artists posing as occult detectives, but John asks Corrigan for information. He says his department thinks he's crazy for what happened, but he takes Constantine's card and his help. Constantine and Zed are at the local hotel to book rooms, and Zed asks why 2 rooms, leading into some incredibly random sexual tension. Constantine likes to know someone personally first, and asks her where she comes from and why his dangerous lifestyle is a better alternative. But of course, Zed doesn't give him an answer.
Can I offer you complimentary champagne in your rooms?
No, thank you. I don't like champagne. Now you know something about me.
Why are they ramping up the sexual tension now? Surely it would have been better to do that when they met, or in the last episode, because it just feels like they missed it out and are ticking the boxes for the sassy female sidekick. It's even more random because it doesn't happen again for the rest of the series. But we've got more plot to get through, as elsewhere a young boy is hitchhiking a lift into the city. The driver agrees but acts creepily and touches the boy's leg. Returning to Zed in the hotel, she gets another vision inside an elevator of the same road the hitchhiker's on. She sees a badly scarred tree and then a car heading straight for it as John pulls Zed out of it. She tells him what happened and John calls Corrigan to report the car accident. Back in the car, the boy, Philip, keeps asking to be taken to the city, but then he suddenly disappears. The guy looks around for Philip, who reappears bloodied in the road, causing the car to swerve off it and into the same scarred tree. The boy looked like he was just recreating the circumstances of his death, which is very different to the first ghost we saw, who was just murdering people. Yeah, it was to make a reference to the urban legend, but it just feels disjointed. Zed and John have gone to the crash site the next morning to investigate. She takes the initiative to pretend to be worried about the possibility it's her sister who crashed the car to the cops, showing how good Zed is at trickery, as she gets all the information about the scene from the cop about what happened. However, Corrigan shows up, arresting Constantine immediately on suspicion of murder, cause he called in the accident before it happened. Can't blame him, really. And before John is taken away, he tells Chaz and Zed to keep an eye out for the ghosts, and make sure they don't kill again. He warns Corrigan that the ghosts are a danger to people, and he should check his reports of previous cases, but Corrigan isn't really listening to him. Chaz has gone to the alley with the crystal bracelet to look for the masked ghost, who he finds as the crystal turns blue. He sees a man walking down the alley as the ghost appears, and Chaz persuades the guy to run, facing the ghost himself. The ghost again asks him if she's pretty.
Yeah, you're pretty.
How about now?
Am I pretty now?
Chaz confirms she is, so the ghost then plans to make him as pretty as her, by slashing him up, and ends up killing Chaz. Which, once again, is verbatim to the urban legend. The woman asks if she's pretty, if you say yes, she takes off her mask, and then asks again, and then kills you. I don't know why the show chose to use it, but I like it. I like how the show keeps incorporating real-life myths and legends. Also, the woman's Japanese, so maybe she incorporated the myth into her own ghost. At the police station, Constantine's being interrogated by Corrigan, who hands him the previous case files that he found on the killings. Corrigan wants to know what he's shot at, but he won't accept John's answer of a ghost. Corrigan discusses his research, namely of the surgical mask killer, a model by the name of Misaki Ross, who had her face slashed up by another model, which caused her to kill herself, and the attacker is now out of prison. John suggests talking to her, and Corrigan also mentions the young boy, and John says to speak to his grandmother. Corrigan asks why to talk to them, but the more important question John wants answering is why now? What caused these people to come back as ghosts? And John tells Corrigan that he's a part of this now, and brushes with the supernatural mark you for life. Which again leads into who Jim Corrigan is, or who he's going to be. Back in the alley, paramedics have arrived to find Chaz very dead. They don't get a pulse, so they cut off his shirt. But that's when Chaz comes back to life.
Sir, are you okay?
I think it just hit my head. I'll be fine. You don't happen to have a spare shirt in that ambulance?
Now, we already knew that Chaz could cheat death, but this is the first time we've actually seen it happen before our eyes, which you'd think would give us some answers, but really it just raises more questions, which will get answered later on in the season, though. Elsewhere, John has gone to speak to the former model who mutilated our stabby ghost. She works at an animal shelter to really emphasise how she's not a horrible person anymore. The attacker explains that she still feels guilty and constantly asks Misaki's spirit for forgiveness. Zed is also talking to one of the bereaved, Philip's grandmother, who reveals that he was supposed to go to college but didn't bother, instead spending his time with his friends, and she feels guilty because the night Philip died she kicked him out of the house. But she and the former model have something in common, as they were both given the ability to speak to the dead from someone. And who would that be?
He calls himself Papa Midnight.
Yeah, Louisiana, the home of voodoo, and spooky stuff is happening with ghosts. It couldn't be anyone else but Papa Midnight, which is a problem for Constantine because Midnight still wants him dead. We then move to one of Papa Midnight's voodoo dance parties as a woman approaches Midnight, and of course, he's not doing this out of the kindness of his heart, so she hands over a massive wad of cash. The woman tells Midnight she feels guilty for not being by her husband's side when he died. He performs the ritual and is immediately possessed by the woman's dead husband as they talk, saying how much they miss each other. But the ritual is abruptly cut short as Constantine has arrived to piss off Midnight some more. John tells Midnight that resurrecting the dead is bad form, but Midnight has no idea what he's talking about, as he hasn't performed a resurrection spell. John tells him about the killer ghosts, but just like Corrigan, doesn't believe him. And just like last time, Constantine is swiftly knocked out by Midnight and put in the boot of his car. So that went as well as can be expected, really. While Constantine is being kidnapped, Zed is back at the crash site. She's set up flares directing traffic, trying to keep more people from dying there. And while she does, Corrigan shows up to give a hand with a good idea.
I have a better idea. Instead of stopping other people from picking them up, why don't we pick them up?
Yeah, that's a good plan in theory. Let's just hope Corrigan's driving is as confident as he is. Back with Midnight, he's busy consulting a skull to verify if what Constantine says is correct. We hear whispers, but Midnight seems to have gotten an answer. Midnight needs to check on the people he used his magic on and goes to speak to the woman we saw before, with Constantine still in the boot of his car, who's only now just woken up. Unfortunately, he came prepared for being handcuffed. In the house, Midnight speaks to the woman and is surprised to find her husband is back to life, but it's clear that whatever happened is killing her slowly. Midnight tries telling her that this wasn't what he intended and that it won't end well, but she's not listening. Which is again very different to the two ghosts, as he's not killing random people, just sucking the life out of his wife. Which in a way makes him more insidious, because it's implied he knows what he's doing, whereas the other two ghosts are just under some kind of compunction to kill. Midnight returns to the car wanting to speak with John, but he's already out. Midnight's humbled somewhat, telling Constantine that his magic is messed up, and is told it's the rising darkness that's working against him. And he reluctantly agrees to a truce with Constantine, erasing his debt. But John asks for something else. He wants to ask his sister a question. The sister John's referring to is Midnight's skull he likes to talk to. See, although Midnight might not look it, he's actually several hundred years old, as he was cursed with immortality for as long as the white man ruled over the black man in America. And he was forced to decapitate his own sister by the person who cursed him, and he communes with her skull to get information on the afterlife. It's a fascinating backstory, but it is a shame the series doesn't really explore it. But anyway, shifting back to Chaz, who seems to be a glutton for punishment, as he's gone back to the alley, getting another positive on the bracelet. And elsewhere, Zed and Corrigan are still driving along the road looking for Philip. They also talk, and Corrigan surprises Zed because he knows her and what she's running from, as he worked on her missing persons case. But the conversation is cut short as they find Philip on the road looking for a ride, and they pick him up. While driving, Zed tries talking to Philip, telling him how hard it must be to leave home, but that's when he disappears and reappears in the road. But Zed's not interested in crashing and speeds up, going straight through him, as Philip disappears again. But hey, they didn't end up wrapped around a tree, so it could have gone worse. John and Midnight have gone to the cemetery as they need the bodies of the ghosts for the ritual that will put them to rest with Midnight's voodoo. But John's not really putting much stock in voodoo.
And what do you know? Jackass of all trades, master of none.
That was a pretty good insult, actually. And honestly, I don't think Constantine would disagree with that assessment. He pretty much said as much when he referred to himself as a petty dabbler in the dark arts. They find one of the bodies in a tomb, and Midnight says what they're doing is disrespectful. Yet John makes a good point.
This is disrespectful.
No, those people came to you for closure, mate. You took their money without thought of consequence. Because of you, they've got more blood in their hands. That's disrespectful.
Yeah, Midnight really doesn't have much of a right to be all high and mighty here, because he caused all this crap, and he took grieving, distraught people's massive wads of cash. Midnight may be working with John to help stop this, but he's still the bad guy in this situation. Back at Midnight's place, John's talking with Zed, trying to figure out what's the connection between the ghosts other than Midnight. She's off to pick up Philip again, and Midnight's ready to start the ritual. They start the pyre and the chanting, and while they do, Zed and Corrigan find Philip again, giving him a ride. Zed tells him about the conversation she had with his grandmother, and it seems to work, as Philip tells Zed to pull over right at the scarred tree. However, back at the ritual, there's a problem. As they reach a crescendo, the fire extinguishes itself, seeming to not have even touched the bodies. Midnight blames Constantine for not respecting his voodoo gods, accusing him of stealing other people's cultures. Constantine's quick to say, well, whatever works. But then things get personal.
It worked wonders on that little girl you sent to hell.
Well, at least it wasn't my own bloody sister.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that came to blows, really. A bit too close to the bone for both of them. But they don't realise just how alike they are. Both Constantine and Midnight have deeply scarred pasts, and they both use magic for their own reasons and to assuage their own guilt. It's just that John walks a more moral line, for the most part. Midnight says he doesn't need John. If he can raise the dead, he can put them back. But John tells him it wasn't even him, it was the women with their powerful guilt that did all the work. And of course, that's when things click. John realises what they need to do, asking Midnight for the phone, as he knows what went wrong. Chaz is back in the alley and quickly saves another person from the ghost, leading to another confrontation.
Do you think I'm pretty?
I don't know. Do you think I'm pretty?
Do you... What do you mean?
I wondered, do you think you're pretty?
Do you think I'm pretty?
Do you think it's gonna rain?
Do you think I'm pretty?
Can you believe it's taken me this long to start asking you questions?
and once again going right along with the urban legend, because one of the ways to stop a Kujisaki owner is to ask the ghost if she thinks you're pretty, or some completely irrelevant question which confuses the ghost, as you just saw. It confused me at first, but I really love this injection of urban legend. However, let's just hope that doesn't mean they're going to stick Slender Man in the show at some point. Back at the ritual, Corrigan has retrieved the women for Midnight's ritual. John explains it hasn't worked because the women are keeping the dead alive through their guilt. One of the women doesn't want her husband to go again, but Midnight explains that this is the way it has to be. And as they get their consent, they begin the ritual again, which seems to work this time as the fire roars and we see all the ghosts disappear one by one and then float out of the fire. Corrigan meets back up with Zed to continue their previous conversation. He tells Zed about the missing persons case reported by her family, but he does tell her that the file no longer exists, kissing Zed on the hand, which is when she gets another vision. Which finally brings me back to who Jim Corrigan is, because it's no secret that Jim Corrigan will die. That's inevitable, because Corrigan is the Spectre, a spirit of vengeance out to punish the people who killed him and then punish all evil. That's why there was green light around him, because that's the Spectre's main colour scheme. It's a great reference. And it also shows that Constantine's world is a small part of a much bigger thing. And hey, I'm up for a Spectre TV show, bring it on! Back with Midnight and John, they share one last drink over their shaky truce, and Midnight makes an offer to John, a chance to speak to his mother. But that's not what Midnight promised, so he speaks with his sister's skull to give John an answer to what it is he's dealing with.
Well? All your efforts are in vain. A darkness is coming, heralded by someone close to you. Someone who will betray you.
So yes, something's rotten in the state of Constantine and the rising darkness seems all but inevitable, which is a dark end to another dark episode. This episode very much felt like a Monster of the Week thing, but with the inclusion of Midnight, it kept the episode from being just a random inclusion into the series. Also, Corrigan will be a character to look out for. This episode had everything, character development, plot development, on top of a pretty interesting story, so overall, it's a good episode. However, next time, we'll be taking a look at a less plot-centric episode with Rage of Caliban. So until then, see you next time.